Welcome to Next Level Operators, where we spotlight the people building high performing businesses and how they're thinking about what's next. So, I'm Jesse Spiegel, and today I'm joined with Nick White. He's the co founder and managing partner of Smart Building Collective, a global certification and research ecosystem that is defining what smart means in the built environment. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. Just a little setup. Nick and I go way back. We went to college together, so it's a real pleasure to have him here for this conversation. And preparation for today, I spent some time digging into his background. And honestly, my admiration, my respect for what he has accomplished has just kept growing. His work has been right at the center of how smart buildings are defined. He's bridging technology, science, human experience, and they're the leading certification for some of the most advanced projects in Europe and all around the world, from major commercial campuses, next generation residential developments. They have truly been driving this industry and taking it from kind of buzzwords to measurable outcomes. And I found it, really interesting, exciting to dive into it in preparation for this and with you. Just, when looking at the scope of what you've been a part of, the research, the innovation, the, global projects, your leadership in general behind Smart Building Collective, seems to me that there are few people who have seen the evolution of smart from as many angles as Nick. And so, yeah, I think we got a lot of interesting things that we can cover today. With the leader in this industry movement, I think the most natural place for me to start, where I'm most interested, is kind of just to understand what pulled you into this field. You've worked across so many different spaces. I think back, I remember, you were involved in corporate transformation. Now you're in smart buildings. So, as you looked back, what pulled you towards this field?
Thanks for all those nice accolades and growing words. I think it's a fascinating story, but I think it's about how all of our careers kind of evolve, right? They don't just it's not just you are all of a sudden in this role. It's a step-by-step iteration process that kind of happens and takes you into your career. Mine indeed started from large scale ICT transformation projects where we were implementing tech into building or into organizations.
When you say
And
ICT, for people who might not know, what does ICT mean?
it's just the IT backbone of companies, thinking about ERP systems, their order management process, their logistics process, their these big corporates. Think about a manufacturer of cameras. I started my career with Canon, the camera company, Japanese company, global, massive, shipping millions of cameras around the world. And so there's a huge ICT backbone to all of that. And a lot of the times it's run by Oracle and Siebel. Oracle is, Larry Ellison is now one of the richest men in the world. His company he's that rich for a reason. He's able to implement these systems, and then these companies are relying on those systems to get their job done. And every once in a while, you need to change those systems or you need to put in a new system. And when you implement those things, it's not just, hit the light switch and it works. There's a whole human component to that. There's all these people who touch that system along the way. And as we're moving into the world of AI, that's completely changing. But back then, there were a lot of people on every step of the process touching that system. And so we would implement these new systems. And I hated, or I was always discouraged, I would say, of how businesses would run over their people in that process. They would just say, here's your new technology. Your life is better now. Get on with your day. And these people would be in tears saying, what do you mean my whole life is over in a way? So I did that for a number of years and it was incredibly fruitful and interesting for me as a person, but I didn't like how transformation was run. So I left the corporate world and I started a company called Lab, which is an acronym for Learn, Adapt, Build, which means we learn first, then we adapt our strategies, and then we build. And Lab was a research institution slash consultancy transformation agency. And it still exists today. It's doing some phenomenal research in neurodiversity and neurofeedback and all kinds of cool, new future of work and how work works and all this stuff. And it's really the research arm to our work. And we started doing transformation projects. We were working with leaders on burnout and human performance and why do people do what they do and why do people fall over at work, these kinds of things. And then we got an amazing opportunity with CBRE, which is the largest real estate company in the world, to do a research study on what is the impact of the built environment on people. And we said, yeah, we want to do that. That sounds awesome. So we got this fantastic opportunity and we spent a ton of money with them to build a living lab where we put in sensors and technology to give us data about the building. We put in circadian lighting, which for those that don't know what that is, circadian lighting is lighting that changes with the time of the day. So as the sun comes up and it goes down, circadian lighting mimics that, and it's better for your natural biology and how you function and perform. And then we changed the art and the food and the plants, and we changed everything in the environment and started doing cognitive tests on people to see what the impact was. And of course, I say we, but my co-founder is head of research. It was more her work, but I support more on the transformation side. So we did that, and then the research was amazing. But when we left, the living lab would die because there was no transformation, nobody helping to get more out of that data besides what we did with the research. And then we did that a couple more times with different
No, wait, just real
organizations
quick
and built
to
these.
that point. Nobody, you said when you left, it didn't continue, right? But I don't understand, is it because there was nobody playing your role of facilitating
The
that
lab,
or of maintaining it or managing it?
yeah. So when you put in a smart building technology into buildings, right? You got to go through the politics of getting it approved and all that stuff. You got to go through the privacy, contracting, and all of the discussions that go along with that. You got to pay the bill, which, in some cases can be 250, 300,000 bucks to get something realized. And then you do this research, and that in itself has a ton of value. It can give you as much value as the ROI of the investment itself. So in that way, the second project we did was with Booking.com, and Booking was building a flagship headquarters here in Amsterdam, which was $500 million project, right? So if you're going to do research study to inform that design and it actually is successful, then, what are we talking about? That investment is nothing. But we see a ton of value in that data being continuously used after the research study. But in order for that to happen, you need an organization in place to use that data in a meaningful way. And that wasn't the case. There was nobody there to take it
You were
on and keep
defining
using it.
how to have impact. You were defining how to have impact. Then the question is how to use, all right, we're doing all this research. We're
Go it.
figuring out how to do this. Well, how do we make a building smart? How do we have impact? Great. But how do you actually use that now? How do you use those tools?
Yeah, keep going, iterate, use these things as labs, like learn from it, change things, test again, learn from it, change things, test again. And so we saw a continuous improvement program that was possible, but it would fall flat when we were done with our research, which was fine. We got what we needed. We got the research. The research was hugely impactful. It shifted the industry in so many ways. But what happened is over and over, we kept doing that. And we're saying we're wasting so much time and resource and money to realize these living labs. And why can't we find some smart buildings that exist and are already part of the business process so we don't have to reinvent it? And so where is there a standard of smart that we can just plug into? And then we can do these research studies faster and more, quicker. And
And
everybody we spoke
sustainably.
to, yeah, and everybody said that's a cool idea, but it doesn't exist. So we launched a smart building certification in January of 2020, right when COVID hit, which was a crazy time to do it because no building wanted us to come visit. But that forced us to kind of build a digital first project, digital first program. And then we started certifying buildings. And it took us from human health and performance into all of the subjects that come into real estate. So that's a whole nother story. But we started identifying gaps and opportunities for buildings. And they said, well, where are the solutions? So we launched a solution certification to kind of create matches so we could find solutions for buildings. And most recently, we launched a services certification, which is for consultancy companies and master system integrators. And they're kind of the missing link between solutions and buildings. And then we changed our name to the Smart Building Collective because we believe this is a community effort and it should be a crowdsourced program and a crowdsourced benchmarking. And so that's where it is. And it's a fascinating project and program, and we're learning tons all the time.
It is fascinating. It really is. It's so, I mean, honestly, in some way it's very linear, very, it's just a very, to me, as you describe it, it's just such a natural progression, such an organic thing. It makes so much sense how you went from step 1, 2 to 3. Yeah, and clearly, doing what you're doing, you're going to be on the cutting edge of this stuff. You are blazing the trail with your research. So that is very cool. While I can see this very linear connection, I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, right? Yeah, I'm trying to just crystallize for our listeners, what is the common thread for you in all of this? Like, what do all of these things have in common that has
Yeah.
drawn you in, kept you engaged? You
Personally
like that
speaking, and
question?
and speaking, being a bit vulnerable, I would say. So I'm always okay being vulnerable with you. Um, how your audience takes that, we'll see. But I'm part of a group. It's a Dutch group of consultants that help massive organizational changes. So culture, leadership, how to get people to kind of engage with a change. It's a fantastic group. It's called the Stroomversnellers, which is kind of a what's the translation? It's the energy increasing of speed, help keep the flow kind of thing. I don't know. But it's full of all these incredible coaches and people who understand things far better than I do. And one of the guys was like, Nick, it sounds like you're just super, super curious, and your business is a reflection of that curiosity. And I've had to sit with that in a way because it's like it is. It's all based on my and my business partner's deep curiosity into the human psyche and where people go and why they're going and what stops people. And it's being able to formulate that into a proposition that creates value for the market at the same time. And that's really what it's been about. It's been a journey of how can we support the market and create value in the market, at the same time feed our personal need, I guess, to learn about the world in different ways.
I like that. You know, driven by your curiosity, right, of this subject of this potential. What are you set out to, so you've got this curiosity that's driving you. Like, hey, I'm curious about this. Let's figure this out. Let's dig into it. And, you know, I imagine that there is some part of you that's like, and this is the impact I want to have. What are you set out to change or to prove?
Well, I think that, by doing the work that we're doing and the way that we're doing it and being deeply curious, but not just curious, but actually collecting data, collecting insight, collecting information, and applying that to research models and trying to understand their impact on the grader, right? So like our certification is a benchmarking system, right? So everything we assess and collect feeds the benchmark. So we're learning from each other and we're having the industry learn from each other as well. So that's super fascinating in itself, but you find patterns and you find things that people do well and you have others that do things less well. And we can learn from each other in every different areas or every different piece of the puzzle. So that's absolutely fascinating. And then at the same time, paying attention to the market and how the market is shifting and how technology is shifting, that brings the third dynamic, right? So it's about being at the precipice of those different information models and then seeing how they're bringing you to the next innovation that's going to happen, or the next trend, or the next value driver that a piece of real estate can deliver. It's yeah, it's about identifying patterns and then helping people understand where they are in that pattern and where they could go or not. It's up to them.
So, I guess there's one piece that I'm curious about, and that is, when I ask what the common thread is, I heard your answer about, the common thread is these are things that are of interest to me and I'm chasing my curiosity, but I can't help but see an altruistic kind of thread throughout all this. When I watch your videos online, when I watch other interviews that you do, when I read about your company, it seems like there is, an altruistic kind of, I don't know, component to what is driving you guys. And I'm curious as to what you think, what you think what is the benefit of all this? I mean, yeah, what is the benefit? And I think there's a simple way to put that, but there's also maybe a deeper way to put that, right? Like, we want to help the environment with some, but what is the, what is that altruistic thing that I'm sensing in so much of what I consume of your guys' information?
Well, Elizabeth and I both had our come to moments, come to Jesus moments, I would say, through burnout, right? Where we collapsed from doing things in a way that was unsustainable. And I also saw extreme pain and suffering in the people where I was transforming companies. And there was a lot of burnout there. And a lot of our research is on burnout and human performance and why are people suffering. And then you can take that further and, with the emergence of AI and information overload and social media and, all of these things that are happening in life, they're overwhelming people in that suffering. And we also see that in, just the state of affairs. And then you can start to think about the environment and people even going further to starving and unable to do what is healthy for them or being put in a crap situation. And we can't save everyone and we can't heal everyone and we can't, heal the world, I would say. But we can do our part to try and help the people we can help. And if I always like the 7 deep of why, right? Where you say, "Why are you doing what you're doing?" And if you ask yourself 7 times, you go deep, 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 and it gets pretty freaking difficult to keep answering the question. But if I do that, it always comes down to helping people. Like I am completely privileged and blessed to be able to do the things that I do. And not everybody's that way, or some people are on their journey. Doesn't matter. Whoever's in front of us or with me, how can I help? How can we help you get your business to the next level? How can we help your real estate get to be more healthy or higher performing or whatever. And yeah, I think that's where it comes down to.
Yeah, I gather that. And it's funny because, when I think of smart buildings, the first thing that I pops into my head is environmental stuff. But then looking into what you guys do, it's just, it's the human experience is definitely very central to it and kind of bridging the technology, the science, and that human experience. And so, yeah, I find that
But it's
interesting.
interesting, right? So like 80% of the younger generation are choosing companies based on their environmental impact and their use of technology and these types of things, right? So if you think about it on that macro level, a high performing building from an environmental perspective impacts who's going to work there and what kind of experience they're going to have when working there, right? And it's not just the environment, it's also the health and well-being, it's the air quality, it's the sound, it's the light, but it's also, the work Elizabeth is doing now on neurodiverse design is how do we design buildings for everyone, So people who are disabled or have learning disabilities or extroverted or introverted or male, female, whatever, it should be designed for everyone. And how do you do that? So it's there's so many knock-on effects of the work that we do that in the end you're helping somebody that doesn't even know you're helping them. That's kind of the what I The idea that's in my mind is that people are in these buildings and, come in, have a fantastic day, go home
And
and be
don't even know why.
why I feel so good, and vice versa. You can go into everybody's been into just awful offices or awful buildings where you're in there and you're like, oh my God, I gotta get out of here. You
Well,
know,
I'm in those offices a lot. That is the truth. I juxtapose the kind of buildings that I see you guys working on and the cutting edge technology that you guys are doing, and I don't see that, but I can definitely imagine how that would everything really, honestly, like, I don't like being in those offices. I don't like working in those offices. It is not conducive to me being productive. It's just a fact. Like, I don't go into those offices. Actually, I work with a lot of companies who have offices set up like that, and I choose to work outside of them because that's not where I thrive. And
and
I see the impact on my own, like, I'm very structured. I like efficiency. I don't like to sit down and not be productive. And so when I'm in an environment like that, I can just feel that it is sapping my productivity. And so I avoid it.
well, and what's fascinating is that the AI generation or the AI technologies that are coming out now, for the first time, we're going to be able to do research and quantum computing on the science around this stuff, right? Like we know how we feel when we go into a building, but it's not quantified research in what that feeling drives as far as human performance, productivity, creativity, good ideas versus bad ideas, all that stuff. And I believe that we're actually going to get there where we can start to see how a space makes a creative company versus a non-creative company or a productive company versus a non-productive company. And
That's amazing.
if you've got a staff of 50 people in a shitty office and somebody has the same 50 people in a creative, amazing office, I can guarantee you which one is going to be a higher performing company, hands down.
Well, so sure, sure. But I also just wonder, as you say all that, like, what's accessible, and like, how can company, I work with companies in the trades a lot, right? Not huge, so, I just start wondering what is accessible to these people
Yeah.
today, and is there technology, is there things that they can do now that are, I mean, you're on the cutting edge, but the cutting edge is, in some way, I mean, some of the stuff you're talking about sounds like sci-fi, it's so, it's like, it is so advanced. And so I wonder, I don't know, as you say that, I'm just like thinking about my clients, right? What you have, can I actually maybe offer them and bring them in some like kind of creative, thoughtful way, because I do see the value in this stuff. And I do think that like, it's, I mean, I see the value and I see that it's a product I can sell, right? And
What a lot of it
if
doesn't
there
have to
if
be
I can
rocket
access
science.
it, yeah.
It's
Well, what makes
you can have.
what makes a building smart? What makes a building smart?
Oof, yeah. So smart buildings have different maturity levels, right? And what we've always said is it's not only about the technology, it's about the human interaction with the technology. It's about, do you have an organization in place to use the data, action the data, and do something with it that's of meaning? So like for instance, it's one thing to have an air quality sensor on the wall that gives you the air quality in the space. It's a whole nother thing to have that air quality sensor talk to the building management system and steer the HVAC system, that when the CO2 level hits a certain level, the fans turn on and give you air, right? But if you have a low budget building, as an example, where you don't have the means to go into the new JP Morgan building, which was $4 billion, you can do a lot of design things and cosmetic things for very low cost by just getting some creative people there, which stimulates the creativity. The air quality sensor you can put one on the wall for $100 that turns red when the CO2 goes bad. And you can then, tell people that when it's red, you open the window. Like that's already starting to be smarter. No, it's not full automation of when somebody checks in at reception, the room starts heating up. That's next level. but
Yeah.
there's a lot of
No,
low hanging fruit that can be captured by just
I hear what you're saying there. And I find it fascinating. I do. And especially thinking about, how to apply it to, I don't know, just, I'm looking for quivers for my own personal arsenal. So when I think about that, I'm thinking, how do I help my customers be more efficient? How do I help them adopt, you know, technology and tools you know, that will show them measurable results. So as you talk about these things, they do spark my own interest. So I guess where this naturally leads right now, what we're talking about to me, are bottlenecks, and not necessarily just bottlenecks in terms of working with, smaller organizations or lower budget organizations, but I'm just kind of curious about, bottlenecks in general. What your experience has been. What have the biggest bottlenecks or challenges been that you guys have run into along this journey?
bottlenecks are always human, you know. I think that technology, there's incredible technologies everywhere that solve a lot of problems. And AI is moving so freaking fast, and the capability of it is moving so freaking fast that there is no shortage in tech, right? I think people understanding the technology, knowing how to use it, knowing how to get value out of it, that's a bottleneck. So there's always an element of training. There's bottleneck in culture and in fear, in people being scared that their job is being replaced, or they're an older generation that doesn't necessarily know how to operate tech in a meaningful way. So there's tons of bottleneck there. And then silos of division, right? So having stakeholders being able to speak the same language, focused on the same result, focused on the same goals, there's bottleneck there. And so, how do you bring people learning and incentive, motivation together in a meaningful way is critical. Humans are driven by motivation always. You can't get around it. So, if you want to see a change happen, you have to figure out how to motivate the people that are part of it. And if you don't, then you're going to be going against a river that's going against you, and that can be quite challenging.
All right, I'm putting a pin in that one for us to discuss later. Oh, you just made me realize that I need to bring you on to consult us. In exact that is a bottleneck for us too. Honestly, I swear, I was like, oh shit, I know you know that stuff, and you're really good at that stuff, right? The adaptation, right? Like, how do you get people to adapt these technologies? And that is something that actually I feel really good at, just because I'm a people person and I connect with people and I've got a lot of experience. So ultimately what I'm giving people is very valuable. And because I believe it so much, I, can get them to buy into it. Like, oh shit, I'm going to do this and make money. And, and they buy that. But that is a major bottleneck, right? This AI technology, getting people to, understand it, bring it in, not be afraid of it, and then train them and use it, to get those results. That's an important step of it. So I really do actually want to pick your brain more about that. And just, I think we've got some natural abilities, but I imagine that you've got some thoughts that will, that'll be valuable to us. So pin in that, more about what you were just saying, AI and technology. So, you just said that, and I just read this morning on your LinkedIn this really long post about AI. And, you wrote that, you know, you wrote about finding the line between technology and what technology should be handling, and then what is inherently human, and asking, where should tech and humans begin? And I think it's a question that a lot of us are wrestling with right now, especially as AI becomes part of nearly every business. And, how are you thinking about that boundary today, particularly in the context of smart buildings? Yep, that's the whole question.
I think it's what I wrote was I joined this AI training this weekend, which was pretty amazing. And there was a Harvard professor who spoke. He's talking about left brain and right brain, and he was saying that half your brain is meant for complicated things, and the other half is for complex things. And people are like, well, aren't those two the same? Complicated and complex is like, no, they're very different actually. So complicated are things that can be solved, math, equations, algorithms, business, all those things can be solved through cognitive or making sure that we analyze it in the right way. But complex things are like love, relationships, human things that are easy to understand, but are completely unsolvable. There's nothing there that can be put into a computer and solved. So that's the line in my mind, and we shouldn't be using AI and systems to be our girlfriends or to be our dogs or our cats. We should use it to solve problems and then free us up to go create real relationships, spend more time in nature, spend more time on the complex things. So that's what I believe. And I think smart buildings is very heavy on the complicated stuff. And I think we try and get more and more into the complex stuff, and we should maybe stop there.
Yeah, yes, and I guess I think the other thing that you said that speaks to, I think, a conversation that's going on right now in the world, right, is this fear of AI, taking your job, displacing you. And while I acknowledge that, I think that, there is going to be some of that, and it is something that we have to look at and consider. It also, speaks to its limitations and what we still have over AI. And, I think as humans, right, and as humans doing business with other humans, that complex side, is it complex or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that complex side is still something that we dominate over. We still have over the AI and is still valued by customers. And so I've seen some companies adopting AI tools, but forgetting about the human side of it. And that
Going too
becomes
far.
that becomes their bottleneck. You can't be a contractor who does everything with AI, because you still got to go out to these properties, right? You still got to, do the measurements. And, we talked to somebody recently who was, part of this organization that was just doing every single aspect of it, and they were making lots of mistakes because there were certain things that just the AI couldn't do. And so I think it is about finding that balance, figuring out how to utilize it, like you said, and and that we still have a place in that relationship.
Well, I think the work, and then I have to go. I'm sorry, but
All good.
because we could talk for hours. The work is to get clear on what you're trying to do. What is the goal? What is the line that you're willing to do? Like one of the things that you don't want to do is replace the thing that you like doing the most, right? Like as an example from a human experience, there's things that we enjoy, and if we have AI doing all that stuff, we're going to be home bored, maybe rich is whatever, where you can, go sit on a yacht, but even sitting on a yacht, you'll be bored after a while, right? So I think you have to think about what do you want and focus on that, right? And a lot of that is human stuff. It's it's communicating with people. Yeah, I speak for myself in that way. But
Well, and
yeah,
you
I think
speak for most business partners, business owners in that way. For me, that's why I do what I do right now. Literally, you just spoke to it, which is I want AI to do the things I don't want to do so I can do the things I want to do more. And that's what I've
exactly.
dreamt about forever with AI. And finally, now I can have it. And I know you and all these other business owners who are my friends and in my community that want that too. And so ultimately, that's, what's exciting to me about our current business. I know you said you got to go, and I'm going to let you go. But I do have one last question for you, which is just kind of what's the next, what's the next thing for Smart Building Collective? What's in the next year, 5 years? Where do you see your guys going? What does success look like?
Well, so we now have the whole infrastructure in place from building certification, solution, service, assessor program, all that stuff. So it's about trying to scale it to the point where you're helping more people and getting better insights, getting more thorough insights, and therefore able to continuously help more people. So that's it. And hopefully publishing some incredible research that drives the industry further. I think that's exciting.
Awesome. Well, I wish you all the luck, and I'm sure I will hear all about it, and I will follow all of it. Nick, it's been awesome having you here. I love how you're bringing the human side to technology and reminding us that smart systems only matter if they make life and work better. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, man, and I look forward to, our next conversation.
Sounds good. Say la vie.
Take it easy.
Bye.